The champagne tower glittered under the crystal chandeliers of the Riverside Country Club, each glass catching the light like a promise of celebration. I stood near the entrance in my navy dress, the one Mom had always said brought out my eyes, watching guests arrive for what was supposed to be my parents' 40th anniversary party. I'd spent 3 months planning every detail, from the orchid centerpieces to the string quartet now playing their favorite waltz. The ivory invitation in my purse had my name embossed at the bottom, hosted with love by their daughter, Elena Martinez. I didn't know then that in 2 hours, I'd be standing in the parking lot with mascara-stained cheeks, my relationship with my parents shattered like dropped crystal. My sister Vanessa arrived fashionably late, her husband Trevor trailing behind her like an expensive accessory. She wore crimson, a color that always made her look like she owned whatever room she entered. We'd never been close, separated by 5 years and what felt like an ocean of personality differences, but I'd hoped tonight might bridge some of that distance. Family occasions had a way of softening old rivalries, or so I'd believed. Elena, darling, Mom swept toward me in her silver gown. According to YouTube analytics, 99% of viewers are not subscribed. That's a huge number. By subscribing the channel that is completely free, you'll help support the channel and never miss fresh content. Dad beside her in his best suit. They looked radiant, genuinely happy. My chest swelled with the satisfaction of having created this moment for them. Everything looks absolutely magnificent. You've outdone yourself. I just wanted it to be perfect for you both, I said, embracing them. Dad's cologne, the same one he'd worn since I was a child, brought tears to my eyes. These were the people who'd raised me, who taught me right from wrong, who'd always emphasized the importance of family above everything else. The evening unfolded beautifully. Guests praised the venue, the food, the ambiance. I'd negotiated with the caterer for weeks to get my parents' favorite dishes just right, had personally selected each song the quartet played. Old friends told stories, glasses clinked, laughter echoed off the high ceilings. I moved through the crowd, ensuring everything ran smoothly, checking with the catering staff, making sure elderly relatives had comfortable seating, playing the perfect host. Around 8 o'clock, I noticed Vanessa and my parents huddled in conversation near the bar. Something about their body language made my stomach tighten. Vanessa kept gesturing, her face animated in that way she got when she was upset. Mom's hand flew to her mouth. Dad's expression darkened like a storm rolling in. I approached carefully, my heels clicking on the marble floor. Is everything okay? They turned to me, and the looks on their faces stopped me cold. It wasn't concern or sadness. It was disgust. How could you? Mom's voice trembled with fury I'd never heard directed at me before. How could I what? Confusion wrapped around me like fog. What's wrong? Don't play innocent, Vanessa spat. Just admit what you did. Father stepped forward, his jaw clenched. Did you really think we wouldn't find out? That you could steal from your own sister and get away with it? The words made no sense, like he was speaking a language I'd never learned. Steal? I don't understand what you're talking about. Vanessa's diamond bracelet, Mom said, her voice breaking. The heirloom from Trevor's grandmother, worth over $30,000. She put it in her clutch during cocktail hour because the clasp was loose, and now it's gone. And you were the only one who had access to her things. The accusation hit me like a physical blow. That's insane. I didn't take anything. Why would I? Because you've always been jealous, Vanessa said, tears streaming down her perfectly made-up face. You've never forgiven me for marrying Trevor, for having the life you wanted, and now you've stolen from me at our parents' anniversary party. How sick can you be? People were starting to stare. I could feel eyes turning toward us, conversations pausing mid-sentence. Heat flooded my face, but it wasn't from embarrassment. It was from the pure shock of being accused of something so vile. I didn't take your bracelet, Vanessa. I swear on everything I love. I didn't touch your things. Liar. Her voice rose, carrying across the room. The quartet fell silent. I saw you near the coat room earlier. You had the opportunity, and Trevor told me about your credit card debt. You need money, don't you? The credit card debt was real. Student loans from my master's degree, combined with some unfortunate medical bills from last year's emergency appendectomy. But I'd never mentioned it to Trevor. How did he know? That has nothing to do with this, I said, trying to keep my voice steady even as panic clawed at my throat. I've never stolen anything in my life. Mom, Dad, you know me. You raised me. Please, you have to believe me. My father's expression could have been carved from stone. The evidence speaks for itself. You had access, you had motive. And frankly, Elena, I'm disappointed beyond words. I thought we raised you better than this. But I didn't do it. My voice cracked, desperation seeping through. Please let me help look for it. Maybe it fell out somewhere, or... Enough, Mom said coldly. I think you should leave. The words hung in the air like an executioner's blade. Around when the 100 guests watched in frozen silence. I saw former neighbors, family friends, relatives I'd known my whole life, all staring at me with expressions ranging from pity to condemnation. You're asking me to leave? I couldn't believe this was happening. The party I planned, that I paid for, you paid for it with what money? Vanessa sneered. Oh wait, I know exactly what money. That's not fair. That's not true. Tears burned my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not yet. Mom, please. I'm your daughter. A daughter who steals from her own family isn't someone I recognize, Mom said, her voice like ice. I want you to leave. Now, before we call security. I looked at my father, silently begging him to intervene, to be reasonable, to remember who I was. But he just turned his back on me. If you truly have nothing to hide, you'll leave quietly and let us handle this without causing more of a scene, Dad said without looking at me. You've embarrassed us enough for one night. The unfairness of it stole my breath. I'd spent months making this night perfect for them. I'd maxed out my one functioning credit card on the deposit alone, had worked overtime for weeks to afford the upgrades they'd wanted, and now I was being expelled from my own event like a criminal. I wanted to scream, to demand they listen, to force them to see reason, but years of being taught to respect my parents, to value dignity and composure, held me in check. If I made a scene, it would only confirm their worst thoughts about me. If I fought back, it would look like guilt. So I did the only thing I could do. I held my head high, ignored the whispers and stares, and walked through that crowd of judging faces toward the exit. My hands trembled as I retrieved my coat, my vision blurred with unshed tears as I pushed through the heavy doors into the cool October night. In the parking lot, I finally allowed myself to break down. Leaning against my decade-old Honda, I sobbed until my ribs ached, until my carefully applied makeup ran in rivers down my face. The unfairness of it burned like acid. I'd done nothing wrong, yet I'd been convicted without trial, sentenced without evidence, discarded by the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. The drive home was a blur. I barely remember walking up to my apartment, barely remember collapsing on my couch still wearing my navy dress. My phone buzzed repeatedly, texts from relatives who'd been at the party, calls from friends who'd heard what happened. I ignored them all. For 3 days, I barely ate or slept. I called my parents a dozen times. They didn't answer. I sent long, heartfelt messages explaining my innocence, pleading for a chance to defend myself. They went unread. Vanessa blocked me on every platform. It was like I'd ceased to exist. On the 4th day, my Aunt Rosa came to my apartment. She was Mom's older sister, a woman who'd always been kind to me, though we weren't especially close. I don't believe you took that bracelet, she said simply, sitting across from me at my tiny kitchen table. I've known you since you were born, Elena. You're many things, but you're not a thief. Her words were the first kindness I'd received since the party, and they nearly broke me all over again. Then why don't they believe me? I whispered. Why won't they even listen? Rosa sighed deeply. Your sister has always been your mother's favorite. You know that. And your father, he sees Vanessa's success, her marriage to Trevor, the life she's built, and he's proud. You, with your art history degree and your struggles, I think it's easier for them to believe you'd make a desperate choice than to accept that their golden child might be lying. But she is lying, I said. I don't know why, but she is. I believe you, Rosa repeated. And the truth has a way of coming out. You just have to be patient. Patience was all I had. I went back to work at the museum where I worked as an assistant curator, threw myself into upcoming exhibitions, tried to rebuild some sense of normalcy, but the wound stayed raw. My parents had chosen my sister over me without hesitation, had assumed the worst without question. That betrayal ran deeper than any accusation. Weeks passed. Thanksgiving came and went without an invitation to the family gathering. I spent it alone, eating takeout and watching old movies, trying not to imagine my parents and Vanessa laughing around a table I wasn't welcome at. December arrived with Chicago's first snow, and with it came the first crack in Vanessa's perfect facade. I learned about it from an unexpected source, Trevor. He called me out of the blue on a Tuesday evening, his voice tight with tension. "Elena, we need to talk." "I don't think that's a good idea," I said carefully. Trevor had never been my favorite person. He was pompous, obsessed with status, exactly the kind of man Vanessa would marry. "Your wife made it clear." "Vanessa's been acting strange," he interrupted. "Ever since your parents' party. She's anxious all the time, jumping at shadows. And last night, I found something." My heart started to pound. "What did you find?" "I can't talk about this over the phone. Can you meet me tomorrow, the coffee shop on Michigan Avenue near your work?" Against my better judgment, I agreed. Trevor looked haggard when he arrived at the cafe. His usually perfect hair disheveled, circles under his eyes. He slid into the booth across from me without ordering anything. "I found the bracelet," he said without preamble. "My grandmother's bracelet, the one Vanessa said you stole." The world seemed to tilt. "Where?" "Hidden in the back of her closet, in a shoebox behind her winter boots." His hands shook as he ran them through his hair. "I found it 2 nights ago when I was looking for tax documents she'd stored. At first, I thought maybe it had been recovered, that she'd forgotten to tell me. But when I asked her about it, she got defensive. Started saying it must have been returned anonymously, that maybe you'd had a crisis of conscience." "I never took it," I said quietly. "I tried to tell everyone that night." "I know." He looked miserable. "I'm starting to realize a lot of things. Elena, there's more. I've been going through our finances because something felt off. Vanessa's been spending money we don't have. A lot of money. She has credit cards I didn't know about, all maxed out. She's in debt up to her eyeballs." The pieces started clicking into place with sickening clarity. "How much debt?" "Nearly $80,000. He looked like he might be sick. Designer clothes, jewelry, spa treatments, trips with her friends. She's been living beyond our means for years, hiding it from me. I think she invented the theft to deflect from her own problems, and maybe to get the insurance payout on the bracelet." Insurance fraud. My sister had framed me for theft to cover her own financial disasters and potentially commit fraud. The betrayal was so enormous I couldn't quite process it. "What are you going to do?" I asked. "I don't know yet," Trevor admitted, "but you deserve to know the truth." "I'm sorry, Elena. I'm sorry we all believed her without question. I'm sorry I didn't defend you that night." After he left, I sat in that coffee shop for hours, nursing cold coffee and trying to decide what to do with this information. Part of me wanted to march to my parents' house immediately to shove the truth in their faces and demand an apology, but a larger part of me knew that wouldn't work. They'd chosen to believe Vanessa once already. They might just accuse Trevor of lying to protect me, or claim I'd somehow manipulated him. So I did nothing. I simply waited. The truth, as Aunt Rosa had promised, had a way of emerging on its own. 2 weeks before Christmas, everything unraveled. I heard it first from Rosa, who called me sobbing. "Elena, it's all falling apart. Vanessa's whole life is falling apart." Trevor had confronted Vanessa with the evidence of her debt and hidden spending. When cornered, she'd admitted to lying about the bracelet, but claimed it was because she'd been desperate, that she'd panicked about her financial situation and needed someone to blame. The admission had led to a massive fight. Trevor had moved out. But that wasn't all. Trevor, furious at being deceived and embarrassed, had told his parents everything. His mother, the original owner of the bracelet, was a prominent figure in Chicago's social scene. She'd been heartbroken to learn that her family heirloom had been used in such a scheme. She'd told her friends, who told their friends, and within days, the story had spread through the entire social circle my parents and Vanessa had worked so hard to be part of. The same people who'd watched me be humiliated at the anniversary party now knew the truth. Vanessa had lied. She'd falsely accused her own sister to cover her own misdeeds. The judgment that had fallen on me now fell on her tenfold. "Your parents know," Rosa continued. "Trevor showed them the bracelet, the credit card statements, everything. Your mother hasn't stopped crying for 2 days. Your father is—" I've never seen him like this. The shame of it all, Elena. Everyone they know is talking about it. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt hollow. Have they asked about me? I couldn't help but wonder. They're too devastated to face anyone right now, Rosa said gently. Give them time. Time. They'd needed no time at all to condemn me, but apparently required plenty of it before they could acknowledge their mistake. Christmas was bleak. I spent it alone again, though this time Rosa invited me to her house. I declined. I wasn't ready. The call from my mother came on New Year's Eve. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Elena. Her voice was small, broken. Please, can we talk? Your father and I, we need to see you. They came to my apartment the next day, looking older than I'd ever seen them. Mom's eyes were red and swollen. Dad couldn't seem to look at me directly. We were wrong, Mom said, the words tumbling out like they burned. We were so terribly, horribly wrong. We should have believed you. We should have listened. We should have... Her voice broke into sobs. Dad finally met my eyes. There's no excuse for what we did to you. The way we treated you, throwing you out of your own event, refusing to hear your side. We let our favoritism blind us to the truth. We let our pride in Vanessa's life prevent us from seeing what she was really doing. You destroyed me, I said quietly. The tears I'd been holding back started to fall. You didn't just accuse me of theft. You told me I wasn't your daughter anymore. You chose her over me without a second thought. You didn't even question it. I know, Mom whispered, and I will regret it for the rest of my life. We talked for hours. They explained how the revelation had shattered their world. Not just learning about Vanessa's lies, but facing how quickly they'd abandoned me, how deeply their bias ran. The social fallout had been severe. Friends had distanced themselves, not because of Vanessa's debt, but because of how our parents had treated me. People who'd been at the party remembered my dignity in the face of their cruelty and had judged them accordingly. We're pariahs now, Dad said without self-pity, just stating fact. The people we spent years impressing want nothing to do with us, and we deserve it. What we did to you was unforgivable. You humiliated me in front of everyone who mattered to you, I said. You believed the worst of me instantly, and now you're here because you faced consequences, not because you genuinely realized you were wrong. That's not true, Mom said desperately. Yes, the social consequences opened our eyes to how others saw what we did. But Elena, the worst consequence is knowing we hurt you, that we lost you, Vanessa's problems, the gossip, the judgment from others. None of that compares to losing you. I wanted to believe them. Part of me ached to forgive them immediately, to fold back into the family and pretend none of this had happened, but I'd learned something during those long, lonely months. I was stronger than I'd known. I didn't need their approval to survive. I didn't need their love to have value. I can't just forget what happened, I told them. You didn't just make a mistake. You revealed something fundamental about how you see me, about who you believe me to be. That doesn't go away with an apology. We know, Dad said. We're not asking you to forget. We're asking for the chance to earn your trust back, however long that takes. I looked at these people who'd raised me, who I'd loved unconditionally for 28 years. They looked smaller now, diminished by their own choices. And I realized that karma hadn't just exposed Vanessa's lies. It had exposed the truth about all of us. I need time, I said finally. I need you to understand that this isn't something that can be fixed quickly. You hurt me in ways that go deeper than you realize. We'll wait, Mom said, however long it takes. They stood to leave, and at the door, Mom turned back. Your Aunt Rosa told us about the party expenses, that you'd gone into debt to make that night perfect for us. We had no idea. I wanted it to be special, I said. I wanted you to feel loved. We did, Dad said, his voice thick with emotion. And we repaid you by treating you like a criminal. Elena, we're paying you back every cent you spent, whether you forgive us or not. It's the least we can do. After they left, I sat in the gathering dark of my living room, trying to process everything. The vindication I'd imagined would feel triumphant was instead melancholy. Vanessa's life had imploded. Trevor had filed for divorce. Her debt had forced her to sell most of her possessions. And the social circle she'd valued above everything wanted nothing to do with her. My parents had lost their standing in the community they'd worked decades to join, and I had been proven innocent. But at what cost? The answer came to me slowly, at the cost of illusions. I'd lost my illusions about my family's unconditional love, but I'd gained something more valuable, the knowledge of my own resilience, my own worth, independent of their validation. Spring came, bringing with it gradual healing. My parents and I met for coffee every few weeks, awkward at first, then slowly more comfortable. They didn't make excuses or try to minimize what they'd done. They simply showed up consistently, proving through actions what words couldn't repair. Rosa threw a small dinner party in March and invited me. When I arrived, I found my parents there too. It wasn't a grand gesture or forced reconciliation, just a quiet meal with family. We talked about safe things, books, work, the weather. But afterward, Mom hugged me with fierce intensity, whispering, "I'm so proud of who you are, Elena. I'm sorry it took me this long to really see you." I heard about Vanessa through the family grapevine. The divorce had been finalized. She'd moved to a small apartment on the outskirts of the city, was working 2 jobs to pay down her debt. She'd sent me a letter in February, a long, rambling apology that read more like an attempt to absolve herself than genuine remorse. I never responded. Some betrayals were too deep for words to bridge. In April, the museum promoted me to associate curator. I'd been working on an exhibition about resilience in art through the ages, how artists had created beauty from pain, meaning from suffering. At the opening, my parents attended, standing quietly in the back. They didn't make a fuss or demand attention. They simply came to support me. After the event, as we stood outside under the Chicago spring stars, Dad said something that finally began to thaw the frozen place in my heart. "You know what I've learned from all this?" he asked. "That integrity isn't about never making mistakes. It's about what you do when you're tested. We failed that test, Elena, spectacularly. But you showed more grace and dignity in your worst moment than we've shown in our whole lives. I'm sorry it took losing you for us to understand what we had." I didn't have words, so I just took his hand. It wasn't forgiveness, not entirely, but it was a beginning. Summer brought unexpected closure. I ran into Trevor at a gallery opening. He'd aged in the months since our coffee shop meeting, carried himself with less arrogance, more uncertainty. "Elena," he said, seeming genuinely glad to see me. "You look well." "I am," I said, and meant it. "How are you?" "Learning to rebuild," he admitted. "The divorce was finalized last month. I'm realizing I spent years valuing all the wrong things. Vanessa and I, we deserved each other, really. We were both so focused on appearances that we forgot about substance." "I hope you both find what you're looking for," I said. And surprisingly, I meant that too. "I owe you an apology," he said. "Not just for believing Vanessa, but for how I treated you over the years. I looked down on you because you didn't fit into our materialistic worldview. I see now that you were the successful one all along. You had integrity. We just had money and status, and those turned out to be worthless." We talked for a few minutes more, then parted ways. I didn't feel anger toward him anymore. The whole situation felt like a story that had happened to someone else, a painful chapter that had closed. By autumn, nearly a year after the party, I'd found a kind of peace I'd never known before. My relationship with my parents would never be what it was. That innocent trust was gone forever. But we were building something new, something more honest, even if more fragile. They'd quietly sold their country club membership, stepped back from the social climbing that had defined their lives. They'd started volunteering at a homeless shelter, of all things. "We lost our way," Mom explained when I asked about the change. "We forgot what actually mattered. Losing you showed us that." On the anniversary of the party, Rosa organized a small family dinner. Just her, me, and my parents. No fanfare, no speeches. But at the end of the evening, Dad gave me a small box. Inside was a simple silver bracelet engraved with a single word: resilience. "We had it made for you," he said, "to remind us and you of your strength. You survived something that would have broken most people. You maintained your dignity when we gave you every reason to lash out. You're remarkable, Elena, and we're sorry it took us so long to see it." I slipped the bracelet on, feeling the weight of it, the meaning. "I forgive you," I said quietly, and realized I meant it. Not because what they'd done was okay, but because holding on to the anger was heavier than letting it go. They both cried. We all did. Later, driving home through the autumn night, I thought about karma, about justice, about how the universe balances itself. Vanessa had lost everything she'd valued: status, marriage, respect. My parents had lost their social standing and had to face their own prejudices. Trevor had lost his illusions And me? I'd lost a family that loved me conditionally, but gained the knowledge that I could survive anything. I'd lost my naivety about love and loyalty, but gained a clearer understanding of my own worth. The party that was supposed to celebrate my parents' love had instead revealed painful truths, but those truths had ultimately set me free. I didn't plan Vanessa's downfall. I didn't orchestrate my parents' social exile. I didn't seek revenge or demand justice. I simply stood in my truth, maintained my integrity, and let time reveal what was always there beneath the surface. That, I realized, was the real power of karma. Not punishment from above, but the natural consequences of our choices revealing themselves in time. Vanessa's lies had caught up with her. My parents' favoritism had cost them dearly. And I, by refusing to compromise who I was, even in my darkest moment, had ultimately won something more valuable than vindication: self-respect. The bracelet caught the streetlight as I turned the wheel, the word resilience glinting in the dark. I smiled. It had been a long, painful year, but I'd survived it. More than survived. I'd grown from it. And that, I thought, as I pulled into my parking space and looked up at my modest but peaceful apartment, was the best revenge of all. Living well, loving myself, and knowing that no one could ever take that away from me again.